Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Kerrigan. Welcome to this session on key points in funding IP-rich businesses. So we'll first cover the purpose and scope of this session. What we're looking at here are the strategic and legal considerations when lending where IP rights and intangible assets are core to the value of a business. And we'll look at that through different lenses, the structuring, diligence, documentation, security interests, and planning for enforcement so that we have a robust structure in place to go ahead. I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a lawyer advising a lender. The lender could be a bank or a private credit firm. Both would take more or less the same approach for the purposes of today. So we start with the challenge. IP is difficult for lenders, and we can contrast that with real estate. Lenders have funded real estate forever, and mortgages over buildings are very well established and understood, and buildings don't go anywhere. So it's easy to ensure that you have control if you need to enforce. You can imagine that all of those things don't apply in the case of intellectual property rights, but intellectual property is now fundamental to the innovation economy. All of the technology and business models that are based on technology have intellectual property rights and other types of intangible assets underpinning them. So the challenge for lenders is how to make safe loans against intangible assets. IP is not always registered or registrable, and the nature of intellectual property is that it's owned everywhere. It isn't a domestic asset in the way that a building with an address is. Lenders must deal with some legal and regulatory complexity, which we'll set out. And in particular, the practical point is that lenders' desire to control the intellectual property mustn't prevent the business from being able to operate as usual, deriving value from exploiting the intellectual property. So we'll start by saying that there are different types of intellectual property for these purposes. They may all have value in a business as usual situation, but that may change in circumstances where a lender would wish to enforce. In other words, there is some distress. The best intellectual property for a lender is intellectual property that has standalone value. Some intellectual property that is, for example, dual-use technology. If the business in which it's operated fails, it can be bought by another business and used by that business.